Roller coasters and video games are two things that seem to go together very well. 22 years ago, Roller Coaster Tycoon was released for PC. Since then, lots of other coaster games have been released, some being good, some being really good, and some being, well,
one big pile of shit.
The most popular roller coaster game right now is Planet Coaster. Released in November 2016, Planet Coaster is nearly 5 years old, and it still has just as big of a following as it did when it came out, if not bigger. The game is a spiritual successor to Roller Coaster Tycoon 3, which is arguably the best of the Roller Coaster Tycoon games and my personal favorite of them. Planet Coaster has a massive park builder, sandbox mode, and it gives you the ability to build pretty much whatever you want in your park. As great as this sounds, I do have a bunch of little things that I don't like about this game that make it not as quite as good as it could be. So what could Frontier Developments do to make the game better? Is the game good or bad in its current state? Let's find out. Real quick before I start the video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe because it would really help me out. Here's how this is going to work. I'm going to go through some different elements of Planet Coaster, talk about them, give them a score out of 10, and then average out all of the scores. The closer the final score is to a 10, the more I'd recommend Planet Coaster. The closer it is to a 0, the less I'd recommend it. Alright, let's get into it. First, I want to talk about the coaster builder. And here's the thing with that. If you make a coaster in this game, it could either be really good or it could turn out really bad. It really depends on your skill with the coaster builder. You could be an absolute god like Variable or Silverette, or you could be like Ollie43 and make coasters looking like this. Another problem is that even if you are skilled with the coaster builder, it's hard to get your track smooth and look good. It's easy to get it smooth, but to make it look good as well is a massive challenge that honestly shouldn't even exist. What typically happens is you make an element and the shaping is good, like that's a good element, like perfect, chef's kiss. Then you hit it with the smoothing tool and it comes out looking like this. Sure, it's smooth now, but look at it. Ew. If you play Planet Coaster a lot, you may be saying, just use the 4-meter method. It makes it smooth and it keeps the shaping of the element. And, while that's true, I don't want to have to spend 20 minutes making an Immelmann just so that it runs smoothly. Also, I want to shed some light on the coaster trains. Some of them are just fine, like the B&M Floorless or Invert, which don't have any theming on them, but then you see a train like this and you think, I don't want to theme my wing coaster to a bird, or I don't want to theme my kiddie coaster to a dragon, or whatever that is. Or I don't want to theme my hydraulic launch coaster to a race car. But you can't do anything about it, and you're stuck with the themes train. Not only this, but some of the trains just look ridiculous. I mean, what is this? Like, actually, what is this? To sum it up, the coaster builder in this game is a hit or miss. If you're willing to spend 3 hours placing tiny track pieces and making custom supports, then you can make something really amazing with this coaster builder. If this isn't you though, then your coasters might just have to suck. And I don't mean that in a bad way, I'm just saying that the coaster builder really isn't that good. 5 out of 10. Next, I want to talk about paths, and this might be a short one, but something definitely needs to be said here. Now, I'm not going to call the path system in Planet Coaster bad, but it is a little bit weird. If you look at an aerial view of really any amusement park, I'll use Six Flags New England as an example, then you'll see that paths make up pretty much the entire ground. The only places where there isn't paths is wherever there's a ride, a building, or something else. While making a path system like this one in Planet Coaster is definitely possible, it's very difficult, it probably won't turn out that good, and it's definitely not the way that paths are supposed to be used in the game. The quote correct way to make a path in the game is by placing long skinny path pieces and then adding rides, shops, and other attractions to your path. This works, and you can definitely make a functional amusement park out of this, but it's just not true to how actual amusement park paths are in real life. I'll give the path system in Planet Coaster a 6 out of 10. Next up to talk about is buildings and scenery. Personally, I think this is somewhere where Planet Coaster can shine. Even without any DLC, Planet Coaster has lots of different options for building, and all of the different types of walls, roofs, and other pieces can look really good when put together. It's amazing what you can do with the hundreds of building pieces. You can make custom shops, coaster stations, and so much more. The scenery in the game is also really good in my opinion. There are lots of different props and animatronics for almost any general theme imaginable. Not only this, but there are also natural scenery items, including trees, rocks, and a bunch of other stuff. Another thing that I want to talk about here is the terrain editor. I've heard people say that they don't like the terrain editor in this game, but personally I think it's really good. It's a huge step up from Roller Coaster Tycoon 3's terrain editor, which looked good sometimes but was pretty flawed. Planet Coaster's terrain editor though isn't too complicated, and you can actually make some pretty good looking terrain with it. Something else that I find cool is there are actually different types of water. There's rough water, calm water, dirty water, and clean water, and while this doesn't seem like a big deal, it can actually make a big difference in the way that your pond or lake looks, and it's for the better. If you can't tell, I really like the whole system of making your park look good by making buildings, adding scenery, and editing the terrain. I'll give it a 9.5 out of 10. Next up is the selection of flat rides, dark rides, and any other ride or attraction that isn't a roller coaster. Let's start off by talking about flat rides. I'd say that Planet Coaster has a decent selection of flat rides. It has all your basic flat rides like Ferris wheels, teacups, frisbees, Larson loopers, Enterprises, and a lot more. One thing I will say is that a lot of the flat rides require a DLC, a little under half of them to be exact. And honestly, it shouldn't be that many. I understand why they do this, and it's to make money, but it's a little frustrating having to pay $11 just so I can place a large carousel in the front of my park. Another thing is that similar to the coaster trains, a lot of these flat rides have theming on them, so it can be a bit difficult fitting them into your park even if the ride itself is a good fit. Take the Huss Enterprise for example, or the Collider as it's called in the game. This is a ride that rarely has any theming in real life, and it's just fine how it is. The Collider though in Planet Coaster has a sci-fi theme. It's orange and white and it looks like a spaceship. Of course, if this is the theme that you want for this ride, then great, but most of the time, you want to theme it to something else or just not give it any theming at all. The same applies for rides like the Zamperla Disco Coaster, or the Genie as it's known in the game, and also the Funtime Starflyer, known in the game as the Sunflare. A lot of the flat rides aren't themed, but the ones that are can be really annoying. Another thing that I'd like to bring up is dark rides. You can make dark rides in Planet Coaster, but you need to purchase a DLC. This isn't a huge deal, but if they'd put the dark ride in the normal game, then that would honestly be great. A dark ride is something that almost every amusement park in real life has, and I would like to be able to make one in Planet Coaster without buying a DLC. Again, like I said though, it's not a huge deal, just a little something that bothers me. Now, let's talk about other attractions. These aren't flat rides or dark rides, but there are a few good ones that aren't part of a DLC. You have things like log flumes and rapids rides. Then you have transport rides like monorails and trains, which can have multiple stations around your park. Personally, I really like these. Transport rides were present in Roller Coaster Tycoon 3, but the stations were a little weird and I didn't like to use them. Planet Coaster fixes this. The stations aren't really weird at all, and the trains look pretty realistic, I think. I don't know, I'm not a nerd who likes trains. Overall, Planet Coaster has a really solid lineup of rides, aside from roller coasters. You can place almost every common flat ride that you can think of, and even some not common ones. There are two things that will bring down this category score though, and those are 1, the DLC, and 2, the theming. You need to buy a DLC in order to have access to all of the flat rides in the game, which is a little annoying. And also, some of the flat rides just look terrible with their theming. And most of the time, the theming won't fit in your park. Overall though, like I said, very solid, 7.5 out of 10. The final topic that I want to talk about is park management. Now, I'm aware that most people who play the game don't actually open a park and manage it, but there are also a lot of people, including myself, that do. Operating your park is pretty easy. You open it, hire staff, place food and drink places, bathrooms, and rides around your park. Once this is done, it's up to your guests what you do. If your guests are getting thirsty, then place more drink stalls. If your guests are bored, then open a new ride. Managing your staff, on the other hand, is pretty difficult. You need staff buildings, you need to provide your employees with an adequate amount of work, you need to keep them happy, you need to keep their energy levels high, and if you don't stay on top of all of their needs at all times, then your staff will quit and your park will literally go to hell. Now you may be thinking, geez, this sounds awful, and well, it is awful. But here's the thing, all you have to do is go into your game settings and turn off staff happiness. This way your employees don't quit, and it's basically like managing a park in RCT3. Doing this makes managing your park fun, and even with this, you still have the element of doing what your guests want and improving your park along the way. And this is my personal favorite way to play the game. Another thing that I want to mention is career mode. Now, oh my god. Another thing that I want to mention here is career mode. Now, I've never actually played career mode in Planet Coaster, so take what I say here with a grain of salt, but I have played the original Roller Coaster Tycoon games, and I've also used scenario mode in RCT3. Personally, I'm not the biggest fan of this game mode. You're stuck within the limits of your budget, and you have to meet certain objectives in a certain amount of time. I don't really like this style of playing, but I do know that there are lots of people who grew up with Roller Coaster Tycoon 1 and 2, so for them, this is probably their preferred game mode. While I'm not a big fan of it, career mode is easily the most realistic way to play Planet Coaster, and it's definitely the most true to how you run a park in real life. I think that out of all of the categories that I've talked about, park management is the one with the most good qualities. It's easy, your guests respond to what you do in your park, your employees have needs that you need to satisfy, and there's also career mode if you want to get even more in depth with making financial decisions and meeting goals. Also, the only problem that I even have with park management can be resolved by simply changing a game setting, so I don't even know if you'd consider that a problem. I give Planet Coaster's park management a 10 out of 10. Like I said in the beginning of the video, I'll now share Planet Coaster's final average score out of 10, and that score is a 7.7. Seeing how this is fairly close to 10, I would absolutely recommend Planet Coaster. It's the kind of game where there are no winners and losers, and it's really just about doing what your heart desires. If you want to build a roller coaster, then do that. If you want to manage a park and make financial decisions and bring guests in, then you can do that. If you're anywhere in between, then you can do that too. There really aren't any limits to what you can do with Planet Coaster. So, is Planet Coaster good or bad in its current state? I would say it's good. Could it be better? Yes. This begs the question, what could Frontier Developments do to improve the game? Well, the first thing that they could do is fix the smoothing tool. Right now, the coaster builder is honestly not that good, but if they would just change the smoothing tool, maybe even just a little bit, then that would make it miles better, and it would be much easier to make good-looking coasters and smooth elements. Another thing that would benefit the game is if Frontier would go a little bit lighter on the DLC. There are some coaster types, rides, and stuff that honestly don't have any business being a part of a DLC. I'm talking about things like the large carousel, the Schwarzkopf Looper, and the Scrambler. These are some of the most common rides that you can find anywhere, and the fact that you have to pay extra money for them in Planet Coaster is kind of dumb. The last thing that I would improve is to hold back on the theming. I know that theming makes everything look better in a park, but having to deal with the preset theme for a flat ride can be a bit annoying. To sum the whole thing up, Planet Coaster is a good game, and it's the best game out there in my opinion for building and managing a theme park, despite the couple of problems I have with it. Do I like Planet Coaster? Absolutely. Should you try out Planet Coaster if you haven't already? Absolutely. Anyways, this is CT Coasters, signing off.